Apple Pies and Other Amends by ToEatAPeach, read by LMX Marbella. Chapter 9. The following Tuesday at work, Hermione does something she knows she'll probably regret. She arranges a happy hour after work at the Leaky Cauldron with Harry, Ginny, and Ron, and Eric, and Theo the Knot. She prepares Theo beforehand, an old nod, effusive with "please, please, please," and "they'll like you, I promise." She even provides him with a few talking points and Gryffindor etiquette tips, just to be safe. Harry, Ginny, and Ron, however, they don't have a clue. Hermione has learned that this approach works best with this bunch. Forethought and planning were always more her strength. But for her childhood best friends, blind improvisation is usually the right course. Still, she feels a small step of guilt when the two redheads and Harry enter the bar that night, joking and smiling and totally unaware of what awaits them. Her tactic proves risky for a second when Ron, catching a glimpse of Theo beside her at the table, turns on one heel to leave. Thankfully, Harry clasps a hand on Ron's shoulder and marches him towards Hermione while glaring at her from behind Ron's back. She rises to kiss all three of them on the cheek, whispering, "I'll explain," into Ginny's ear and "be nice" into Ron's and Harry's. Thus warned, the three new arrivals settle with apprehensive frowns into the free seat at the table. Harry, of course, is the first to break the tense silence. "Eric, good to see you."
"You too, mate. Glad you guys could make it out tonight. I honestly wondered if you'd be able to break away after that nastiness in Nocturne Alley this afternoon."
"Yeah," Harry says, slightly raising an eyebrow towards Hermione at the implication that Eric knew more about this get-together than him. "It was rough going there for a while. Got it all sorted out in the end, though. Mostly thanks to Ron here." "What happened?" Hermione asks, and then takes a sip of her wine in an effort to appear blasé. Judging by Ron's ongoing glare, it doesn't work. Ron opens his mouth to speak, but Ginny, bless her, cuts him off excitedly. "Their Auror Squad found a case of cursed bludgers moving through one of the Nocturne black markets. Can you believe it? Apparently a dealer was trying to get them past inspections in time for the World Cup."
"In favor of us or the Yanks?"
Theo asks. Ginny assesses him coolly before answering. "The Yanks, apparently."
"Well, then it's a damn good thing Potter and Weasley stopped them, isn't it?"
The table is silent for a moment before everyone breaks into tentative laughter. The sound punctures some of the tension in the air, and Hermione feels her shoulders relax a fraction.
"It wasn't just the two of us today,"
Ron explains. He leans into the table to grab a pin from the round Theo bought beforehand.
"Harry and me, we're still in training for another year. Maybe two in my case."
"That's not what I heard," Eric says with a conspiratorial wink.
"Word in Andrew's secretary office is that some inspections might be made in the Aura department soon. For both of you."
"Oh, do tell!" Ginny scoots her stool closer to Eric's and the two duck heads to trade ministry rumors. Hermione smiles faintly, thinking of what Draco said the past weekend. Eric was a good choice for Theo. Then she resolved to stop thinking about Draco Malfoy. Full stop. The resolution works, for the most part. But an hour into what has become unexpectedly easy conversation, Theo has to go and bring up the PTSD pastry tour.
"So, Hermione, how's the progress with Draco?"
Theo asks her offhandedly, not seeing the way Ron's eyes bulge from his scar.
"Making any headway?"
It's going well, I think." She takes another drink and hopes against all hope that someone brings up another topic. Fast. But no such luck.
"Malfoy?"
Ron croaks. He looks back and forth between Hermione and Theo, his mouth hanging open a few centimeters.
"What's Hermione got to do with that bugger?"
"It's just part of my project, Ron," she says hastily. "The baking thing, remember? Speaking of which, I've been checking into your ideas for the ganache smoothie, and I think we might be able to make it work. With the right cold agents, of course. I've actually got some notes in my bag if you want to see them." She starts rummaging in her beaded handbag that, regrettably, also has a tin of apple macarons in it. When she sets them on the table in search of her smoothie notes, Ron snatches up the tin, opens it, and takes a big whiff.
"Blimey,"
he says, as his eyes roll back in his head.
"They smell like heaven. When did you make these?"
Hermione's mouth falls open, empty of a good answer. Desperate for some kind of assistance, she scans the table. Eric's no help. He merely takes an amused sip of his pint. Harry and Ginny just exchange worried glances. It's Theo,
Merlin love him, who comes to her rescue. Oh, Theo says with an artfully careless shrug. That's all me, mate. I'm a big macaron obsessive. Didn't Hermione tell you? I've been commissioning different flavors from her for a few weeks now. These are some of her best, I think. Damn right they are, Ron agrees, shoving one of the biscuits into his mouth without permission. He moans happily through a chew and gives her one of those adoring yet perplexed stares she always liked. Hermione, love, I think you may have really found your, what's it called, your niche. I mean, I knew you were a talented witch, but I honestly can't believe you made these all by yourself. I can't believe it either, Eric snickers before Theo elbows him lightly in the ribs. Thankfully, the subject of baking, and obliquely Draco, goes by the wayside, and the rest of the evening is far less fraught. Theo, Ron, and Ginny fall into an animated discussion about the World Cup. Harry and Eric talk ministry politics, arguing good-naturedly about several of Harry's rivals for future head of the Auror office. As she follows each conversation and weaves in and out wherever necessary, Hermione feels a distinct sense of peace. If one set of her friends likes another, then her life suddenly seems a lot less complicated. That is, if she doesn't factor a certain sarcastic blonde into the equation. Which she's not going to. Nope. Finally, far later than she originally anticipated, everyone decides to call it a night. With a quick kiss to Theo's cheek, Eric leaves the flue home from the Leaky's fireplace. Ron, Harry, and Ginny move to go as well, until Ginny grabs her purse and sinks back into a chair. I just want to hang for a bit, yeah? She says to Harry, brushing his cheek with the back of her hand. Hermione and I have bridesmaid business to discuss. Her reference to the wedding is apparently enough excuse for Harry and Ron to escape in a flurry of quick goodbyes and apparitions. Within seconds, it's only Ginny, Hermione, and Theo left at the table. Hermione thinks that Theo will leave too, so Ginny can pull out the orange binder Molly made to keep the wedding details organized. But the infamous binder doesn't appear. Instead, Ginny motions for Theo to keep his seat, throws a quick glance around the pub, and signals the bartender for another round of drinks. Ginny frowns suspiciously at Hermione and Theo, but she doesn't speak until the drinks have been delivered and Hermione has taken a bracing gulp of wine. Okay, Granger, Ginny drawls, inadvertently making Hermione think of someone else. Spill it. Harry's told me about the current subject of your project, but I know he left out details, being Harry and all that. I've been watching you and Naughty exchange sly little glances all night, so spill it. An uncomfortable silence descends until Theo blurts out, Hermione likes Draco. I do not, Hermione shrieks, but she knows after the echo of her protest fades, the damage is already done. The thought is out there now for everyone at the table, including herself, to ponder. Ginny flips her long red braid, props her chin onto one palm, and assesses the table sagely. Interesting, she says, and not at all that shocking given what I saw tonight. But the real question remains, what kind of like are we talking about here? Exactly, Theo exclaims. He leans towards Ginny and ignores the outraged "oh" into which Hermione's mouth has just fallen. That question has been bugging Eric and me for the last 3 weeks. Hermione has a sudden memory of her 14-year-old self sitting on her bed in the Gryffindor's girls' dormitory with a pillow pressed to her face, shaking her head vigorously at Parvati Patil. Out with it, Hermione. Do you like Ron or do you like him? This current conversation feels a bit like that. 3 weeks, Ginny marvels, folding her arms onto the tabletop and giving Hermione an appraising once-over. 3 whole weeks, huh? I'm not hiding anything, Hermione squeaks, and then she cringes at exactly how unconvincing that sounds. She sucks down another long drink, one that Ginny and Theo apparently have no problem allowing, and takes another step at it. I'm really not hiding anything from you two, I swear. I'm doing just what I set out to do, which is contact survivors of the war and help them work through what's haunting them. I know desert is a strange way to go about it, but it helped me, and it seems to help other people too, including Malfoy. Ginny's kind enough not to note Hermione's slip of tongue. Instead, the younger witch reaches out to clasp one of Hermione's listless, outstretched hands. After a moment's hesitation, Theo does the same with her other hand. He nods at Ginny in solidarity and then says something to Hermione that she doesn't expect. Not at all. Hermione, no one is more grateful about what you've decided to do than I am, trust me. He throws a pointed look at the back of the Leaky,
towards the fireplace where Eric flew home.
But I think Red here and I are both thinking the same thing.
Which is?
That you need to be careful, especially when it comes to Draco Malfoy.
Hermione feels her shoulders tighten. What exactly do you mean by careful, Theo? He exchanges another fretful glance with Ginny and then sighs.
What I mean is that Draco and I are friends, but he's not my closest mate, and I'm not his.
Really? Somehow this startles Hermione, given how often she and Draco talk warmly about Theo the Nut. Theo, however, just nods.
Really? I care about the bloke very much, but he's kind of a closed book these days. When we were kids it was different. Everyone in Slytherin used to joke that he was the human equivalent of one of his family's ridiculous white peacocks. All strut but no substance. You could learn everything about that boy if you sat through one of his boasts long enough. But then the war came, and we all know how spectacularly wrong things went for Draco after that. Dumbledore, that horrible estranged woman, Crabbe. Hell, even Draco's own mom, what, with her saving Potter's life and all. Draco had everything he ever believed in thrown back in his face like rubbish, and it's made him a touch, well, fragile isn't quite the right word, but it's close.
Hermione shakes her head. Theo, if this speech is your attempt to convince me that you don't know Draco very well, then you might be failing. You seem to know him awfully well indeed. Theo sighs.
But that's my point. That's exactly my point. One can only get to know this new Draco so well. He drinks, and he says snarky things, and very, very occasionally he shows up to our reunions. But mostly he stares at the wall and thinks about himself, or oblivion, or angst, or whatever it is fallen anti-heroes think about.
Then how do you know he's still the selfish, arrogant prick he was in school? Ginny gives Hermione's hand an inadvertent squeeze. How do you know he hasn't changed just like the rest of us did after the war? Theo makes a small noise of appreciation.
Another interesting point, Red. I don't. Not really. All I really know is that Draco doesn't let anyone in anymore. Not long enough for any of us to figure out who he is now. Sure, we all have the occasional drink. Him, me, Blaze, Pansy, sometimes those Greengrass girls. And I know Draco takes Greg and Millie out once a month to some swanky restaurant in Diagon Alley. But I mostly think Draco does that because he knows all of Gold's family assets were seized after the war. Greg and Millie are poor church mice now. Aside from that stuff, it's just Draco, the manor, and those nutter parents of his. Circling the drain alone forever. Or at least until his parents find him some suitable, dry, pureblood maid.
Hermione considers what Theo just said. How well it does or doesn't dovetail with what she's recently learned about Draco. Many of the things Theo's revealed do fit what she knows. The drinking, the closed-off demeanor, the mix of angry isolation and desperate need for company. And yet, there's something missing between the Draco she's getting to know and the one that Theo has just described. There's the man who bemoans Harry's childhood victories over him, but can also admit his own failings in the form of a dozen burnt biscuits. There's the aristocratic boy who preens and snores when cornered, but pulls down the collar of his jumper to reveal what must have been one of the most physically painful days of his life. There's the man who has, on more than one occasion, referred to the worst day of her life with regret, shame, and unmistakable note of longing that it hadn't happened at all. Then there's the man who didn't put a drop of Octans into his tea last weekend. Draco's complex. I do rather like that about him. Hermione concludes this aloud before she fully organized her thoughts, and long before she weighed their consequences. A furious pink floods her cheeks, and, for some reason, she feels the need to cover up the error by staring boldly at her companions, as though she's challenging them to contradict her. Theo, of course, offers her a sympathetic swipe of his thumb over her knuckle. I know you do, Hermione. Otherwise, you wouldn't be helping him. It's Ginny, however, who does the unexpected. The younger witch releases Hermione's hand, stands to me even closer, and wraps her friend in a tight hug. Then she whispers into Hermione's ear, but loud enough for Theo to hear. And that is one of the many reasons I love you, my lion-hearted friend. That Friday evening, the night before her next trip to Malfoy Manor, Hermione decides to take a different approach to her little project. Originally, she'd planned to gather supplies for another treat that Draco might like, chocolate treacle pudding, which she remembers him shoveling into his childish mouth with a plomb every Halloween at Hogwarts. But Theo's words keep flitting around her brain, So Hermione skips her usual trips to the bakery specialty shop in favor of the exotic foods greengrocer a few blocks from her flat. It's there in the brightly lit produce aisle that she finds what she's seeking. She plucks a mesh bag from a pile, lifts it to her nose, and takes a deep whiff. The sweet, tart scent of citrus causes her eyelids to flutter shut and her lips to curve up slightly. These are perfect, she thinks, the perfect test to see what Draco Malfoy makes of one of her happy memories. Thank you for listening to today's chapter of Apple Pies and Other Amends by ToEatAPeach, read by LMX Mybella. If you would like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and releases, you can follow me on AO3, YouTube, Instagram, or Tumblr. Thank you to ToEatAPeach for letting me use their story, and thank you to all of you for listening.